At the back, in English, it's more important that you hear her. Okay. Buonasera tutti. I'm sorry about the our technical problems that we're late.
Spiace per I problemi tecnici. Spiace per I problemi tecnici. Sentite? No. Ok, mi sentite adesso?
Okay. I'm going to be talking about a sustainable solution to waste management. This is my 37th visit to Italy, and I keep coming back for two reasons. One is Vino Rosso, and the other one is Italian creativity. You have given us the most creative people in the Western civilization, for 2,000 years.
Per 2000 anni ci avete dato, voi italiani, le persone più creative della società occidentale.
And I will be arguing that waste is a design problem. We need to design waste out of the system.
I rifiuti sono un problema di programmazione, ma una volta che la programmazione è fatta correttamente si possono gestire.
So we need that creativity, that superb Italian design capabilities to face the biggest challenge of our generation, namely to create a sustainable society.
E c'è bisogno di tutta la creatività italiana per riuscire a programmare una sostenibilità ambientale dei rifiuti.
We're living on this planet as if we had another one to go to. Can you read that at the back?
Se riuscite a leggere le slide, quello che ci ha tradotto, io evito di tradurlo.
Okay, then we don't translate. You simply can't run a throwaway society on a finite planet. We're robbing our own children and grandchildren of their resources. Waste is the evidence that we're doing something wrong. And landfills, discarica, simply bury that evidence. And incinerators simply burn that evidence. And we have to face the real problem. And the real problem is fighting overconsumption and this throwaway ethic. So we have to say no to the throwaway society and yes to a sustainable society. Now in the 20th century, we talked about waste management. And the question we asked is, how do we get rid of our waste with the minimum of damage to our health and to the environment? And that seemed to be a reasonable question. But now we've moved to the 21st century. We're not talking about waste management anymore. We should be talking about resource management. And the key question is, how do we handle our discarded resources in a way which doesn't deprive future generations of some, if not all, their use? So, the issue for the 20th century was safety. That was what we were talking about, safety. Safety of discarica, safety of landfills. But in the 21st century, with resource management, we should be talking about sustainability. Incineration is simply not sustainable. Incineration wastes a huge amount of public money when right now we can't afford to waste a penny of public money. Secondly, so right now we can't afford to waste.
Adesso non ci possiamo permettere il lusso di sprecare neanche un centesimo con la crisi che c'è.
It wastes precious material resources. It wastes energy. It wastes the opportunity to really fight global warming. It produces a toxic ash. It produces toxic air emissions, and there are better alternatives. I'm going to look at these one by one.
Adesso le prendo in analisi una per una.
Incineration is a waste of public money. Brescia, the Brescia incinerator, the most beautiful incinerator in the whole world. Right? 300 million euros. 300 million euros, 80 jobs. 300 million euros to produce 80 jobs. Ridiculous. Incineration is a waste of precious resources. If you look at the value of recyclables in the US, Northwest Coast, they went from $33 a ton in 92 to $140 a ton in 2008.
Questo è il grafico del valore dei rifiuti in Nord America.
If you look at the Los Angeles waste stream, the value of each of these materials in the waste stream, you'll see that number 2 in value is plastics. Plastics. 28 million out of $103 million. That's the value of that item.
Della plastica a Los Angeles.
And the paper, carta, 15 million, the third most valuable item in the waste stream. And what do we burn in incinerators?
E cosa bruciamo negli inceneritori?
Paper and plastic.
La carta e la plastica.
We're burning valuable resources.
Stiamo distruggendo cose che hanno un valore.
Ah, but we do it to make electricity.
Ma lo facciamo per fare energia.
You save 3 to 4 times as much energy by recycling, reusing, composting than you do by burning. Let me illustrate this. Unfortunately, this is not, the colors are not projected. We're getting it projected, but the colors are not projected. Let's take this PET plastic. That's plastic bottles. 26 times more energy is saved by recycling than you get from burning it. It's an environmental crime to burn plastics.
È un crimine ambientale bruciare la plastica.
And it is stupidity for the Italian government to put subsidies into incinerators to produce energy.
Ed è stupido dare dei sussidi per bruciare le cose.
Incineration is a wasted opportunity to fight global warming. Now, the global crisis began with the Industrial Revolution when we imposed on a planet that functions in circles a society that functions in a straight line, linear society. Do you want to translate that? Because I think it might not be so easy to read that.
Allora, si è passati in un ambiente che ha una economia circolare. La civiltà ha imposto una struttura lineare,
Sì.
per cui tutto quello che viene prodotto viene poi usato e viene buttato e finisce lì, non si torna in circolo.
So the linear society begins with extraction of raw materials,
Si estraggono le materie prime,
manufacture of products,
si producono,
consumption of those products,
si consumano,
and then waste,
si
rifiuti.
buttano.
A straight line. And of course, when you burn it, that's the end of that straight line. This is the conclusion of the linear society.
L'incenerimento è la fine di quella società lineare.
Now we stimulate consumption with advertising, particularly advertising on television.
La pubblicità stimola il consumo.
Over-advertising produces over-consumption. By the time a high school student has left school, he or she will have watched 350,000 TV commercials.
Un liceale appena uscito dal liceo avrà già visto 350.000 spot di pubblicità.
They're programmed for an over-consuming lifestyle.
E sono programmati per uno stile di vita consumistico.
Now, there's an illusion here and there's a reality. The illusion is that the more you consume, the happier you become. The reality is the more you consume, the fatter you become, and the more waste you produce. And this is summarized very well in this cartoon here. Here's evolution, and now we'll add in where we've got to. We've got to there. And he's got that from McDonald's over here. Fast food, fast planet. Fast food, fast planet.
Fast food, cibo veloce, pianeta veloce.
So now let's look at the impacts of this linear society. First of all, we use a huge amount of energy in the extraction of these raw materials.
L'impatto della civiltà lineare sul pianeta.
And
L'estrazione comporta l'energia.
in the process we produce a lot of solid waste, a lot of air pollution, water pollution, and carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide contributes to global warming.
E la produzione di anidride carbonica e tutti i rifiuti che produce questa estrazione contribuisce al riscaldamento globale.
More energy on transport, sometimes halfway around the world.
Si spreca energia a spostare le cose intorno al mondo.
More energy on production, manufacture, more solid waste, more air pollution, more water pollution, more carbon dioxide, more global warming, more transport. All of this energy use contributes to global warming. Okay? Now, I'm going to look to see what the different ways of handling waste does to this picture.
Adesso vorrei analizzare una maniera diversa per trattare tutte queste fasi e vedere cosa succede.
Let's start with discarica, landfilling. Nothing! If you bury something, you have to go all the way back to the beginning and start all over again. The same amount of energy, the same amount of solid waste, air pollution, water pollution, and so on.
Se si seppelliscono i rifiuti bisogna ricominciare il ciclo tutto da capo.
Incineration, the same.
Con l'incenerimento la
You
stessa
burn
cosa.
something, you've got to go all the way back to the beginning. If, on the other hand, you recycle, you've cut out this energy use, this transport use, all these impacts. And global warming, down.
Con il riciclo si evita l'estrazione e quindi tutti i rifiuti e tutta l'energia che questo comporta.
If you reuse the objects, you cut out both the extraction and the manufacture impacts.
Riusando le cose si evita sia l'estrazione che la produzione delle cose.
And similarly with composting. But composting does something else. If you look at compostaggio, you look at compost, you'll see bits of wood, right? Bits of wood here.
Pezzi di legno nel compostaggio.
That's cellulose. That's carbon.
Quella è cellulosa.
If that went into an incinerator, that carbon would immediately be converted to carbon dioxide, immediately global warming.
Se quel legno fosse finito in un inceneritore avrebbe prodotto anidride carbonica.
But when this organic material is converted to compost, that goes into the soil and that carbon remains captured, sequestered.
Mentre invece se resta nel compost resta sequestrato nel terreno e non si disperde nell'atmosfera.
This company, AEA, did a report in 2001 and they showed that a combination of recycling and composting was 46 times better at reducing global warming gases than incineration producing electricity.
Si risparmia 46 volte energia riciclando e compostando che non l'energia prodotta con l'incenerimento.
Global warming gases we're talking about here. Reduces
Si
the
riduce
production of
la
global warming.
produzione di gas serra.
Yeah. So it's 46, in terms of reducing global warming, a combination of recycling and composting is 46 times better than incineration producing electricity. Okay. Incineration produces a toxic ash. For every 3 to 4 tons of trash that you burn, you get 1 ton of ash. This ash is produced in 2 places. The bottom ash, which is 90% of your ash is the ash which falls through the grates, and 10% of the ash is the ash, very tiny particles which are captured in the air pollution control. Today, over half the amount of money that's spent on incineration is spent here.
Il 90% dei soldi degli inceneritori va per catturare quel 10% di ceneri.
So with Brescia, 300 million euros, over 150 million euros was spent here.
Più di 150 milioni di euro sono stati spesi per questo.
Now that tells you something. It tells you if you can get a cold process instead of a hot process, you know that the capital costs are going to be at least half less.
Quindi con un processo a freddo anziché a caldo si dimezzano i costi.
Actually, there's much less.
Molto meno.
Because you're creating a problem here and then you're trying to solve it here.
Perché prima si crea il problema e poi si cerca di risolverlo.
This ash here is extremely toxic.
Le polveri di questa parte del processo sono estremamente tossiche.
In Germany and Switzerland, they put that fly ash into nylon bags and put the nylon bags into salt mines. In Japan, some of the incinerators vitrify the ash. They make it into a glass. Now that's more stable. But it uses most of the energy that they produced to make it into a glass.
In Giappone per vetrificare le ceneri consumano quasi tutta l'energia prodotta con gli inceneritori.
In Denmark, beautiful green, verdi, 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 verdi Denmark, they have a wonderful solution.
Hanno una bellissima soluzione in Danimarca.
They send it all to Norway. And in Italy, nobody knows where the ash is
si
going.
sa che fine facciano le ceneri.
So here we have an industry which is converting 3 tons of waste into a very problematic product, which if you do it, handle it correctly, costs even more money to get rid of.
Si crea una cenere che è molto più problematica e più costosa da gestire che se non gestita diversamente.
Okay, toxic air emissions. We are concerned about toxic metals like plombo, cadmio, mercurio, and we're also worried about new substances formed in the burning process called dioxins and furans. Now, that was what we were concerned about 3 or 4 years ago.
3 o 4 anni fa ci eravamo preoccupati.
Serious problems. But it's got worse. Over the last few years, 3 or 4 years, we've now discovered that these toxic metals and the dioxins and furans are coming out in these very, very tiny particles called nanoparticles. And this is a very, very serious issue indeed. And we regulate incinerators at 10 microns, 10 micrometers. But the nanoparticles are so small than this. This is like cannonballs when you're looking at grains of sand here. Yes.
Allora, prima ci preoccupavamo di questi elementi a livello macroscopico e adesso però ci siamo accorti che queste polveri tossiche arrivano in dimensioni minuscole. Il problema è che la normativa è basata sui 10 micron, che è una palla di cannone a confronto delle nanoparticelle.
Now, in Europe, this standard is going to drop to 2.5 microns, but that's still huge compared to nanoparticles.
Lo standard sarà abbassato a 2.5, ma è ancora una misura enorme rispetto alla misura delle nanoparticelle.
So here we have the most serious aspect of incineration, and it's unregulated and it's unmonitored.
Quindi l'aspetto più pericoloso e più serio dell'incenerimento non viene controllato e non viene regolato dalla legge.
The only reason that we are now concerned about this is because we're finding these nanoparticles in our bodies.
E noi ce ne preoccupiamo perché queste nanoparticelle le stiamo trovando nel corpo umano.
So no government is monitoring this.
I governi non lo stanno controllando.
We are monitoring
Ma
this.
noi sì.
Now there's a scientific paper here by Stéphanie Cormier, published in June of 2006 in Environmental Health Perspectives, one of America's leading environmental health journals.
Una delle testate ambientali di salute leader in America, c'è questo articolo di questa Stéphanie Cormier.
Now if anybody is honestly considering incineration,
Se qualcuno considera l'incenerimento onestamente
and they're not just some part of a corrupt process
e non come parte di un processo di corruzione
serving multinational corporations or the Camorra,
che aiuta le multinazionali o la camorra,
if they were honest
se
and if they were scientific, they should be able to respond in writing to this paper.
Se fossero onesti dovrebbero essere in grado di rispondere per iscritto a questo articolo.
And if they cannot respond scientifically to that paper, then they have absolutely no right to build incinerators
E se non
today.
riescono a rispondervi in maniera scientifica, allora non hanno alcun diritto di costruire gli inceneritori.
So would you please ask anybody in Lazio province, anywhere, anybody in
Chiedetelo a
Italy,
chiunque nel Lazio, nella provincia,
who says to you,
che
like Dr. Veronese,
come
there's no problem,
che non c'è problema,
you ask them to respond. We want a written response to this.
e allora chiedetegli una risposta scritta a questo articolo.
Here's the problem. These nanoparticles are so tiny, they're very difficult to capture, number one. Number two, they travel long distances. And number three, they remain suspended for long periods of time. We already know that respiratory problems diseases from respiratory problems is strongly related to the particulate levels in cities. Well
Noi
established.
sappiamo che ci sono delle patologie respiratorie connesse al PM10.
And we know also that the smaller the particles, the stronger that relationship is.
E più sono piccole le particelle, più diventa forte la relazione con le patologie.
And of course, nanoparticles are smaller than anything that's been studied so far.
E le nanoparticelle sono la cosa più piccola che è stata studiata finora.
And the problem with the nanoparticles, as the particles get smaller, they get deeper and deeper into the lungs.
E più sono piccole, più scendono in profondità nei polmoni.
But nanoparticles are even worse because not only do they get deep down in the lungs, but they easily cross the lung membrane, straight through the lung membrane into the blood.
Ma fanno anche di peggio perché riescono ad arrivare nel sangue
There's no defense.
e non c'è difesa.
And once they're in the blood, they circulate throughout the body, and these particles can get into every tissue. And so last year there was a study from 2007 which showed a study of 65,000 women, 36 cities, a relationship between particulate levels and heart disease and stroke. Respiratory problems are pretty obvious that you're going to get respiratory problems from particles.
I problemi respiratori sono abbastanza ovvi, ma c'è questo studio su 65.000 donne
But we're getting,
che mostra problemi cardiaci.
and the reason is because these particles are getting into the heart.
Perché le particelle entrano nel cuore.
And not only can they get into the heart, but they can get into the brain. They can cross the blood-brain barrier. And here is a nanoparticle which contains
Questa è una nanoparticella
lead, barium, chromium, iron, and this is in the brain.
che sta nel cervello.
I was just staggered when I saw these electron micrographs from Dr. Stefano Montanari. I was absolutely staggered.
E io sono rimasto sconvolto quando ho visto questa immagine di Montanari.
I was as shocked then as I was in the 1985 when I first heard that when you burn household trash, you produce dioxins.
E lo sono stato come quando nel 1985 ho imparato che bruciando i rifiuti delle case si produce diossina.
Up to that time, for me, dioxins was Agent Orange, Seveso.
Fino a quel momento la diossina era Seveso.
And then you find that simply by burning trash, you get dioxins.
E invece ci si accorge che già bruciando i rifiuti si produce diossina.
Incredible. But now I look at this picture and I say we have a method of getting lead directly into the brain.
E adesso abbiamo addirittura il verso di far finire il piombo nel cervello.
Dr. Veronese went on television and said there is 0 cancer risk from incineration. In my view, that was unscientific and it was irresponsible, and Dr. Veronese should get on his knees and apologize to the Italian people.
Dottor Veronese dovrebbe chiedere scusa in ginocchio.
And the reason I say that, we know that these metals, some of these metals cause cancer. We know that dioxins and furans cause cancer, and we know that we can't capture all the nanoparticles. So it's logical, is it not? If a substance causes cancer and you can't capture it, you're going to increase the cancer risk. To say 0 risk is just unscientific.
Non è scientifico dire che non ci sono rischi, perché se noi sappiamo che queste sostanze provocano il cancro e se sappiamo che non le possiamo catturare tutte queste sostanze, come facciamo a dire che non c'è rischio di cancro?
And it's also irresponsible because there are at least 10 studies. 10 studies
10 studi
which show an increase in cancer near incinerators.
e dimostrano l'aumento del cancro accanto agli inceneritori.
Now I hope this has nothing to do with the fact that Veolia, a big incinerator company, has actually paid money to Dr. Veronese's research. Let me tell you a bit more about dioxins. I've been studying this dioxins for 23 years.
Ho studiato le diossine per 23 anni.
The number one concern is that dioxins accumulate in animal fat, grazing animals, cows, sheep, goats, chicken,
Allora,
buffaloes.
le mucche, le pecore, le capre, tutti gli animali che brucano accumulano la diossina nel grasso.
Big, in a big way. In 21 years ago, 21 years ago, I showed in a paper that 1 liter of cow's milk would give you as much dioxin as 8 months of breathing the air next to the cow. 8 months. That's actually translated. All right. Now, once the dioxins get into our body, they accumulate in our fat and we can't get rid of them. Or rather, the man cannot get rid of them. But the woman can get rid of dioxins by having a baby. So the woman is accumulating the dioxins from her food, animal fat. It's accumulating in her fat, and then for 9 months, it's moving from her fat to the fetus. And that is the real problem here. That is the real concern. It may not affect the woman, it probably doesn't affect the man, but 25 years worth to a tiny little fetus is a real problem. And it's a real problem because dioxins interfere with hormones. And hormones regulate fetal development.